Chapter 6. Charlie wasn't worried at all about leaving the river police guy in the middle of the river. Surely river police guys could swim. He was, however, hungry. He opened each of the 2 little lockers in the cabin, a half-eaten packet of biscuits and some tea and sugar lumps and chocolate. He ate 3 biscuits, put the rest in his bag. He pocketed the tea and the chocolate and the box of sugar lumps too. Well, the police guy wouldn't need them now. And then Charlie settled down in the cabin. He didn't want anyone on the ship to notice him, so he'd stay put until dark and then make his way up the ladder. He lay back and gazed up at the great crimson hull to which he was tethered, wondering again who would have a ship like that and where it was going. He could see the ship's name, Circe, picked out in gold on the curve of her great bow. Circe. He'd heard that name before. Now, what was it? After a while he recalled it was the name of the island witch who enchanted Odysseus on his way back from the Trojan War. His dad had read it to him. She'd turned all his sailors into pigs and kept Odysseus for a whole year, making him forget his wife and his son at home in Ithaca. Circe. Odd name for a ship, when the Circe in the story had disrupted Odysseus' sea voyage so effectively. The angle at which the little boat was hoiked up made it impossible for Charlie to face the direction of the Circe for long, as all the blood was going to his head, so he turned himself round and watched the last of the city disappear along the banks. By now they were way beyond the tall shining buildings of the office district. The wharves and the warehouses and stone quays of the big dockyards were giving way to the smaller ship repair yards, the houses on stilts where the wharf workers lived, and finally the wide empty mud flats and salt marshes where the light hung like gauze and the silvery grasses rippled and the tiny voices of hundreds of invisible birds carried over the water, mingling with the rush of the river beneath the little boat's hull. Charlie thought it must be rather nice to live there in one of the stilt houses, with the veranda looking out over the river and the water slapping underneath. You could fish for your dinner out of your bedroom window, with the great expanse of sky and water all around you, and the sea sliding in beneath your home twice a day. He wondered why they didn't have stilt houses in the west of the city, further inland where he lived, why instead people there lived in housing towers or yard houses like his. He didn't want to think about home. He could feel the presence of his mother's phone in his bag and suddenly thought, Mum may not have her phone, but what about Dad? He pulled out his own phone and swiftly keyed in his dad's number. His heart beat fast and his hands were shaking. His dad might answer. He might. The phone rang in a dim, empty distance. Rang too long. And then his dad's voice. His message recording. Hello, this is Aniba Ashanti. Leave me a message and I'll be in touch with you soon. His dad's voice. Charlie felt it deep in his heart. He wished he'd thought what to say, what was safe to say. If they, whoever they were going to listen to the message, he didn't want to give anything away. But he wanted his dad to know what? And he had to leave the message now, because what if he couldn't get through again? He couldn't waste this opportunity. And suddenly he knew what to do. He'd leave a message like his mum's note, clear to them, but not revealing anything. Hi, Daddy, he said cheerfully. Charles here. I'm being a good boy like Mummy said, and I'm at Raffy and Martha's, but I'm going out quite a lot, and I really hope I will see you soon. I've been sailing on the river today, and I hope I'll do some more tomorrow. Ring me soon. I've got my phone on all the time. Lots of love to Mummy. Bye. He was really pleased with himself. If Dad got that message, he'd understand immediately that Charlie knew what was going on. One, he never called him Daddy or Mum Mummy, so they'd know he'd picked up that from his Mum's message. Plus the being a good boy reference and calling himself Charles. Going out quite a lot and sailing on the river today and tomorrow were pretty clear, and the pièce de résistance, the best bit, which had come to him even while he'd been talking, was to say he had his phone on all the time. Of course, he had to turn his phone off during lessons, so now they would know he wasn't going to Brother Jerome's, and they could put that together with the sailing and the really hope I'll see you soon, and know he was coming after them. Bother, he should have said something about the cats. If Mum and Dad knew the cats were watching out for them, then maybe they could send a message. Oh, no. Mum and Dad, astonishingly, couldn't understand when the cats talked. When they were living in Africa, when Charlie was little, Aniba Ashanti used to go frequently into the great forests looking for plants and mosses and fungi for his research. He would go for several days, deep into the dark areas. He would climb the huge trees with roots tall enough to build houses in between, and he would spend days on end in the canopy of the forest, where the monkeys and the butterflies live, sleeping in his hammock hundreds of feet above the ground, while the elephants rootled below looking for big seeds to eat. And sometimes he would take little toddler Charlie with him, strapped to his back. One hot, humid day, very early in the morning, Aniba was carefully scraping samples of bark from a lustrous green creeper way up in the canopy, with Charlie sleeping on his back. Because he was concentrating so hard on getting a good clean sample and trying not to cut himself with his recently sharpened knife, Aniba did not notice a leopardess down below on the forest floor, making her way delicately towards a waterhole nearby. Nor did he notice the strong, pudgy little cub following her, nor, of course, did he notice the tiny emerald green snake on which the cub trod in the dimness of the undergrowth. But he did notice the yowl of pain from the cub as the hot poison sparked into its little body, and the howl of distress from its mother as she realised what had happened. In an instant, Aniba swung down from the canopy, his knife in his teeth, and landed not far from the leopards. The snake disappeared. He zipped into the vast green forest and was gone. The leopardess stayed. She stared at Aniba, and for a moment he felt a shot of pure fear. But the animals hereabouts were used to him. They knew he wasn't a huntsman, that he just hung around in the woods, picking flowers and leaves and digging roots. So she didn't immediately pounce on him and kill him. She just stared, and he stared at her. The leopard cub's yowling had started Charlie yowling too. The two cubs yowled, the two parents looked at each other. Aniba's heart was torn. He desperately wanted to help the baby leopard, and he had in his backpack the antidote to the snake poison. He took it with him everywhere in case he or the child was bitten. But he would have to get it to the cub swiftly, and how to make the mother let him. Her eyes were expressionless. Aniba's face too was a mask. There was only one thing he could do. He was very scared to do it. Slowly and gently, Aniba unwrapped Charlie from his back and sat him on a flat rock behind him, well away from the leopardess. He didn't take his eyes off her while he rummaged in the bag and found the syringe containing the antidote. And then, holding the syringe up like a totem so she could clearly see it, he asked her, "May I help your child?" She stared. Charlie, on the rock, yowled a bit more quietly. The cub was whimpering. Aniba moved away from Charlie, gently towards the cub. The leopardess narrowed her eyes. Her ears were perked up, her whiskers twitching. In a swift movement, she dropped her head and moved. Away from Aniba, away from her cub, away from Charlie. After 10 paces, she stopped and turned and sat, staring again at Aniba. He fell to his knees beside the cub and swiftly, surely injected the life-saving medicine into the cub's fat back leg, and as he did so, "Baby one!" cried Charlie, who had tottered up to Aniba's side and was now reaching out to pat the cub, who squirmed away from the needle. Aniba gasped. The syringe fell and a few small drops of blood appeared on the fur. Charlie laughed. The cub, alarmed, put out a claw and scratched hard. Drops of Charlie blood were on the cub. Drops of cub blood were on Charlie's bleeding arm. The leopardess and Aniba looked to each other. The cub and Charlie yowled again, in unison. Each parent grabbed its child and ran, the cub hanging from the leopardess's tender jaws like a kitten, Charlie tucked firmly under his father's arm. A baby one!" cried Charlie happily. "Meow!" squalled the leopard cub. "Meow!" called Charlie. And after that, Charlie talked with cats as much as with people. He was mystified by their constant feuding and fights between themselves. Though he understood their language, he didn't exactly understand their feelings and their mysteries, but he loved them, and they were his friends. His parents studied him endlessly. They knew what must have caused it, but they couldn't work out why. "He's modified himself," said Magdalene. "Here's everybody fussing about genetic modification methods, and young Charlie here's only done it to himself." "And so, can the leopard cub talk English now?" Aniba wondered. Another thing, he wasn't allergic to cats when so many other kids were. "Fascinating," said his parents over and over again. This was after Magdalene had shouted at her neighbour for 3 days about getting their child into such danger. See you next time.